The story of Speaker's Corner begins with a gallows erected in medieval Tyburn in 1196, just off present-day Marble Arch, at the northeast end of Hyde Park. Upon this grisly platform, the soon departed would be offered the opportunity to say a few words and get any grievances or angry feelings off their chests. We can imagine many of the condemned doing just this. Nothing so motivating the convicted to speak their minds freely as their imminent demise. The total number of hanged reaches somewhere around the figure of 50,000, and we can only imagine the character of many of those last speeches, pleas and visceral rebukes often levelled at the system that sentenced them. After a time, many thousands started congregating to see the hangings, as well as the last words of peasants, common thieves, and at times celebrity criminals, pirates, all manner of villain and political rebel the powers of the day deemed fit for the noose. Entrepreneurial zeal even provoked ticket sales, and platforms with seats were built to satisfy the desires of Londoners willing to pay for the spectacle. This lasted for hundreds of years, but as our story evolves, so too does the politics of free speech itself in Great Britain. On royalparks.org, which owns the land where Speaker's Corner now resides, the following words detailing a key historical point of this institution can be found. The origins of Speaker's Corner, as it is known today, stem from 1866, when a meeting of the Reform League demanding the extension of the franchise was suppressed by the government. Marches and protests had long convened or terminated their route in Hyde Park, often at Speaker's Corner itself. Finding the park locked, demonstrators tore up hundreds of yards of railings to gain access, and 3 days of rioting followed. The next year, when a crowd of 150,000 defied another government ban and marched to Hyde Park, police and troops did not intervene. Spencer Walpole, the Home Secretary, resigned the next day. In the 1872 Parks Regulation Act, the right to meet and speak freely in Hyde Park was established through a series of regulations governing the conduct of meetings. It is this act that has helped enshrine this area with an almost sacred appeal within the Western world and beyond. Hundreds of people now congregate every Sunday, swapping stories, demonstrating, laying down treaties, bringing attention to issues, advocating various political positions, and using the greatest single most powerful gift of free expression, their words. Figures such as Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, George Orwell, Marcus Garvey, and William Morris, the suffragettes, far right, far left, black activists, flat earthers, ancient aliens researchers, vegan activists, and anyone who has something to say have all graced audiences with their thoughts, musings, and polemics over the past century and a half, all given legal legitimacy by the Parks Regulation Act. It has remained a place where many foreigners feel humbled to come, and has given birth to a number of other such Speaker's Corners in countries from Australia to Canada, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and many more. In recent years, however, a dark cloud has descended over the corner, a cloud bringing new 21st century problems to the institution of free speech. Here, at the 150-year anniversary of the 1872 Parks Regulation Act, we shall explore some of these issues. The following speakers were all present at the event, and all are die-hard free speech advocates, many being regular attendees of Speaker's Corner. All were reverently celebrating the corner's milestone, and we hope the following speeches go some way to addressing some of the issues facing not just this bastion of free, unrestricted speech across London and the UK, but should come as a blunt force reminder that the practice of saying what we truly feel is a natural law birthright that much of the world simply does not have. And this should be a reminder and a warning to all that we cannot afford to lose it.
I wanted to come today and to congratulate Steve on organising this great event. I don't know about you, but I think that as an emblem of free speech, Speaker's Corner is of the utmost importance to all of our country, everyone in our country. And the fact is, we used to have a saying called "It's a free country." You used to hear it an awful lot. Strangely enough, you don't hear it very much now. And I think that reflects reality. At the time where Free Speaker's Corner is now celebrating 150 years, what do we have? We have, we have a teacher in hiding up in Yorkshire for what he said, exercising his free speech as a teacher. We've just recently had a film taken down by View Cinema, Cineworld, because of mob rule, basically, not upholding free speech.
Bring back the Lord Chamberlain.
But
Julian Assange.
But I would say this to you, that these things have been going on now for quite some years, these incidents. But the most important thing, I think, is that teachers in our schools should bring their pupils to this place to explain to them the importance of it, because we are now in a situation where there are many young people who don't even believe in free speech anymore. This is a new development. In the past, many of us in the past used to argue about free speech, and it was quite easy because you had the free speech absolutists and you had people saying, "Oh yes, I agree with it, but it's got limitations." Now we're having to argue with people who don't even believe in the concept, and unfortunately that is many
people don't understand the concept.
They haven't been taught the
government agents of the COVID dictatorship.
It is incredibly important, therefore, that our teachers, if that's possible, bring kids to this place, and that we have to make sure that the younger generation actually realise that free speech is the very basis of the society in which they live. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much, Steve Faulkner, and thank you for inviting me along. Great event. Thank you.
So, thank you, Steve, and it's great to see all these faces here. When I was thinking last night about what I was going to say today, Steve invited me last week, I came across a video of Hatun Tash being dragged away from here by the police yesterday.
Yeah, but people corrupt videos.
When all she was doing was exercising her lawful right to free speech. And the Free Speech Union has written to the Metropolitan Police about arresting Hatun on a previous occasion. We've written to them about why they haven't yet made an arrest, because someone actually stabbed her when she was trying to exercise her lawful right to free speech last year here at Speaker's Corner. And apparently, I've spoken to Hatun, she's here today. She said that one of the things the police said to her by way of explanation for why they had dragged her away yesterday, arrested her, even though charges haven't been pressed, that's usually the modus operandi, is that some of the people in the park yesterday thought that her t-shirt, which depicted one of the Charlie Hebdo cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, was offensive. That was part of the explanation. So I thought, I mean, I thought it might be worth reminding everyone. It might be worth reminding everyone of the words. I think the well-known words of that the judge said in the famous Redmond Bate v. Department for Public Prosecutions case, which is, and I quote, "Free speech includes not only the inoffensive, but the irritating, the contentious, the eccentric, the heretical, the unwelcome and the provocative, provided it does not tend to provoke violence. Freedom only to speak inoffensively is not worth having," and that's something we should remember. But I wanted to follow up on something Peter said, which is he's absolutely right. Young people aren't nearly as passionate about free speech as they should be. They don't realise why it should be important to them and not just us. And one of the reasons, I think, underpins the reason why Hatun Tash was arrested yesterday. This view that if you allow too much free speech, it endangers historically disadvantaged, vulnerable groups. That there's a direct conflict between the right to free speech and the safety, the emotional well-being of historically disadvantaged groups. This, I think, is why young people are suspicious about free speech. They think it's only something that benefits the privileged, the elite, male, pale and stale conservatives, not historically oppressed, vulnerable, disadvantaged groups. And I just wanted to address what I think is a huge canard. That's just not true. It's historically ignorant. The reason the suffragettes were able to fight for votes for women was because of free speech. The reason the Chartists were able to organise and fight for votes for working men was because they were exercising their free speech. The reason the gay rights movement in the 1970s in America was able to get off the ground was because of their First Amendment rights. The reason for the civil rights movement, without the First Amendment protections in America defended by the American Civil Liberties Union, the civil rights movement wouldn't have been able to organise, to march, to protest. That's why the leaders of the civil rights movements, including Martin Luther King, were such passionate defenders of free speech. Free speech has been essential for the success of anti-colonial movements in India and South Africa. That's why Gandhi and Nelson Mandela were such passionate defenders of free speech. The idea that free speech is in any way the enemy of historically disadvantaged, oppressed people is the complete opposite of the truth. Without free speech, tons of people wouldn't have the rights they have today. Yes, those rights are under threat. Yes, we need to do more to defend them. Free speech has probably never been in greater jeopardy. But we need to nail this canard that free speech is in some way the enemy of oppressed people, that vulnerable people need to be protected from hurty words. That is nonsense. Free speech is the friend of the disadvantaged. Free speech and social justice go hand in hand. They're not in any way in conflict. Anyway, thank you for coming, and it's great to be here. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Free speech, and there's free speech. Thank you, sir. Yes. Speaker's Corner, in many respects, has never been a place for free speech, in the sense that the 1872 Act does not mention free speech.
Yeah, true.
It mentions something else called public address. Okay, so weirdly, Speaker's Corner is known symbolically as a place for free speech, but free speech does not exist here legally. What's interesting about the history of free speech is how the authorities have tried to heavily regulate ordinary people's voices here. So go back to 1866 when the Reform League had a riot here. They took down Hyde Park railings to try and get greater political rights for speakers here, for ordinary people. Now at the time the Home Secretary was called Spencer Walpole, Horatio Walpole. After the 1866 riots, he then went to the Attorney General and said, how can we stop people campaigning for their rights here? And the Attorney General said, well, it's within your powers to stop people coming here because they're trespassing on the Crown lands. But the Attorney General said, don't do that because that will inflame the excitable passions of people. Now in 1872, because more and more people campaigned for their right to free speech here, the government wanted not to pass a law to allow people the right of free speech, but the right of public address. And there was a debate in Parliament at the time. More Liberal MPs said, well, what the hell is public address? That's not free speech. And the way the government had framed public address, they were going to empower the park rangers to decide who would have the right of free speech or not. And there was a big debate in Parliament at the time. Now, since 1872, the government has, on different occasions, tried to regulate Speaker's Corner in various ways, shapes and form, even today. But the other thing that has occurred here is the different architectural design of Speaker's Corner. So, for example, Marble Arch used to be the grand entrance to Speaker's Corner. In 1908, there's a roadworks that separated Marble Arch. Then in 1961 to 62, there are further roadworks that pushed Marble Arch even further away, but increased the traffic noise round here. And speakers at the time, including Lord Soper, who used to come here, complained that the noise would mean that there'll be less chance for people to exercise.
He was going a bit
their,
tough later on.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That would regulate how people spoke, the increased noise pollution. And in fact, in 1996, when the Royal Parks Agency, 1994, when the Royal Parks Agency did a review of the area, they said the increased noise pollution has meant that there's less speakers in this vicinity here. So the speakers in 1961 were correct. So my point being, you will hear a lot of people say this is a place to celebrate for free speech, but historically the authorities have always regulated people's voices here. And legally, people don't have the right to free speech. The most they have is public address.
Well said.
Okay.
Do you remember your father's old joke?
I remember all of his old jokes.
Do you like sex and travel?
I don't remember that one. What was it?
How do you decide? You want to do rock, paper, scissors?
The police is not doing their job. The police is not looking to put the criminals in jail. Instead, they're looking to put the victims in jail. They're jailing the victims and jailing the speakers instead of jailing the people who attacked them. I don't remember the police chasing the person who stabbed Hatum. I don't remember them chasing the person who stole Hatum's Quran, which was her property.
When I was robbed here in the summer, I went to the police and they couldn't...
I do remember, however, a policeman chasing me from the park during COVID. The only time, the one and only time that I was chased by a policeman in my life. I've never done any crimes, never. Didn't steal, didn't hit, didn't do anything. The only thing I did was show up in the park. The policeman chased me all the way until the end of the road over there. All the way. 100 meters run. He chased me properly. Not when Hatun got stabbed, not when Hatun got robbed in the park. This is what I need to talk about here. This is what we need to focus on. The police is not doing anything. And I know why that is. We all know why that is. Because they expect that if they just jail the person who's provoking, who's being provocative, who's speaking about the things that get some people really upset, if they just remove that person, it's all going to be okay. There's going to be peace. Peace is going to be established. No breaches of peace, correct? Well, no. I tell you what, you're only encouraging the people, the scumbags who steal and who shank people. You're only going to be encouraging them to do the same over and over again. Because they feel unapologetic these days. They feel like they can get away with it. And more scumbags are showing up in Speaker's Corner and lying, cheating, deceiving, stealing and hitting people. It's almost on a daily basis. Every single Sunday in Speaker's Corner, something happens. Somebody gets hit. Somebody gets robbed. Somebody gets pushed around. It can't go on. It cannot keep going on. We need people like PC Barnes to come back to Speaker's Corner and to re-establish order, as they should have, and stop policing free speech. Thank you very much. I've had my speech.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to point out that in the West, we achieved something that no other civilization has managed to achieve. And that is the peaceful transition of government from one party to another without the necessary use of arms. Democracy is completely undervalued in the West. We've lost sight of the achievement of what democracy means.
In so many other parts of the world, changes of government and changes of policy are brought about through the use of force. And free speech is the fertilizer that allows democracy to grow. If you censure speech, if you limit speech, then what you do is you start to bring in the fence around the garden of democracy, and you narrow it and narrow it and narrow it until only one type of flower grows. We've lost the public debate in this country around free speech because we're not fighting for it. We're not arguing for it. And because we have ignored the enemies of free speech, cultural communists, Islamists, religious fundamentalists, who are not playing by the rules that they ask you to play by. So they do discriminate, and they do practice prejudice and bigotry against groups that they don't like.
The Bible's full of
ladies and
prejudice
gentlemen.
bigotry.
And because those of us that believe in free speech and believe in the traditional way of doing things are playing by a rule book that our opponents are not playing by, institution by institution is being politicised by militants of the left. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what can we do about it?
Nothing, Mr. Speaker.
By arguing for an American-style free speech law. Speaker's Corner shouldn't be described as a jewel of free speech, because free speech should exist on every corner of England and the United Kingdom. It shouldn't be a special place here.
But it is, Mr. Speaker.
What we have, ladies and gentlemen, is an absence of militancy from those who want to see free speech. We can organise politically, we can organise culturally. You can take Speaker's Corner to all the other Speaker's Corners that exist in the United Kingdom. Free speech, if it is simply undefended, will continue to be eroded.
In the lockdown, you didn't come.
You've got to defend it. And you've got to defend it not just by talking about it, but through political activism. The police in the corner... I'm nearly finished. The police in the corner are following the easy road, the path of least resistance. They could follow a strategy of regularly reviewing the videos that are filmed at Speaker's Corner, identifying the troublemakers, and then using their powers to ban troublemakers from the park.
Ban you.
It was a policy that was followed by Steve, it worked, and it can be followed again.
And it should be mentioned that all of the examples where free speech have been eroded have two common groups associated with them. The teacher up north, the cinema, and what happened to Hatton Tash. The common factor in all of those was Islamic militancy. And the common factor in the erosion and the cowering to Islamic militancy and the justification and defense of it is the militant left. And what do we need to stand up against these two groups? We need a muscular Christianity. We need a stronger Christianity that would oppose these groups. Because if you don't, the only group that will stand against them is the alt-right, and the alt-right cannot be given the place to stand against these militant Islamics, militant Muslims, and militant left, because if you surrender the debate to these two groups, there will be no guidance to virtue. Any questions? I'll be over there. Next speaker.
This is now a summer of discontent for the great struggle against the World Economic Forum, which wants to impose a new world government, and it's doing it by stealth, starting with the World Health Organization, which is actually an arm of world government in waiting. That is what it is. And we have to leave the WHO, and in fact smash the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum must be destroyed. This summer we've got to break this propaganda movement, which is the basis of the religion of the World Economic Forum, namely the climate con. So we've got this campaign to march for CO2. And on July the 23rd, XRB have marching against CO2. We'll be here marching for CO2. We've got to break them and break the fake Labour servile left along with Starmer and all the nonsense they're propagating.
Are you also going to go outside the Saudi embassy?
The next thing in the autumn is that we will break the ULEZ extension zone. That is the ultra low emission extension zone, which rides on the back of the climate con. There'll be a big court case and struggle there because thousands of people have been refusing to pay. I've got a stack of papers from ULEZ that high. So, together, citizens, we can win, but free speech is totally fundamental to it all. And the watchword I would say, or watchwords, is resist, defy, do not comply. Resist, defy, do not comply.
The reason I feel free speech is so important is because if we don't have people speaking freely, we don't know what is happening. And I only found out about the assaults on our freedom to talk about women and what a woman is 2.5 years ago when J.K. Rowling spoke out. And I knew she's not a hateful bigot. Before then, every time I heard about transphobia and all of the stuff that was said, I thought, oh, they must be right, they must be hateful bigots. And when Kelly J. Keane, who created Standing for Women, some people call her a racist. I don't believe it. Anyway, she created the idea of this as a billboard, and she paid to have a billboard put up somewhere in the north of England, I remember, and it says woman, adult human female. That is the legal definition of what a woman is. And when I saw this, I remember thinking, oh no, that's a bit mean, because men who transition to transsexuals, it's not kind to say that they're not women because they think they're women. And I left it because I thought I don't want to be unkind to people. And I didn't realise that what was happening was literally people are saying that women are not allowed to say what a woman is. A woman is an adult human female. You can only be a woman if you are born female and you grow up and you're a woman. And the people who are saying that we're hateful to say that, you might think, oh, it's just a bit unkindness. What it has led to is children are being indoctrinated into this. Literally, children in primary schools are being told that they have a gender identity and they might feel like they're a boy because they like boys
without their parents' consent.
Or they might be a girl because they like girl things. A boy and you like playing with girly things, it doesn't mean you're a gay boy or effeminate. No, it means you're actually a girl. And the reason this is so damaging, and it doesn't just affect women, is because children are being told this. They're growing up to literally think that they were born in the wrong bodies. And the reason this matters...
They're being mutilated and sterilised.
The reason this matters is that they're being told that the answer to their problem of feeling that they're in the wrong body is that they can take hormones which will stop their bodies going through puberty. And I believed this nonsense. I thought, oh yes, that's kind. Because how awful to be in a wrong body and go through puberty and you're trapped. I didn't know because I wasn't allowed to hear this because people like Posey were being condemned as right-wing, racist, whatever. What it means, when a child is put on puberty blockers, they are, the BBC and everybody was saying, oh, they're reversible, you can just stop them. It's a lie. When children are put on puberty blockers, they tend to stay on them. They literally don't go through puberty. This literally means they have When did nothing that should happen of what people represent? They are sterilised. They are literally unable to ever have children. They lose their sexual function.
Sorry.
So I just want to say, if you hear people being accused of transphobia, please don't accept it. Please actually look into it. Because once I started looking into it, I was so horrified to learn that I had been duped.
Well done.
So I think that's it.
More women at Speaker's Corner.
More women at Speaker's Corner. Thank you very much. Why don't you guys come and speak over here instead of hiding in the corner on the other side? That's the best. Wow.
What a great...
Please remember, if you read that a woman has been convicted of a sex offence, look carefully. Men who claim to be women are now, I think it's 1.8% of rapes in this country are being committed by men who claim to be women. And in court, a male rapist will be referred to, alleged male rapist will be referred to as she, and will even have the nonsense of her penis. And I'm not joking, this is actually the fact. Equal treatment bench book. And they have only just about 6 months ago changed it so that the claimant, the woman, is not forced to say she raped him. Originally, when this book was written, a woman claiming that a man had raped her was forced in court to say she raped me with her penis. So please don't believe what you hear about transphobia. It's not transphobia, it's truth and reality. Thank you very much.
You were wonderful.
Which is they do a fantastic job, ladies and job. They do a fantastic job here under extreme pressure while they've been defunded by the government. The government defunds our police, and when the police make a mistake, you get a terrible little group here just jumping on it as if this is normality. It isn't. Most of the time, the police do a fantastic job here, and we should salute everything they've done, because without the police, this Speaker's Corner cannot happen. We need the police. They do a great job, and I salute them.
We're saluting the police because the police allow Muslim militants to abuse and attack people every single week in the park, and that is why he's cheering them on. Because this man is an apologist for Islamist violence. He celebrated an attack against Hatton Town.
You already spoke, just let
He's justified an attack against Hatton Town.
Steve, who has organised this event, who is Tommy Robinson's lieutenant, who's Tommy Robinson's lieutenant, and his pseudo-atheist Steve's hero beats up police officers. And he, pseudo-atheist Steve, has come to this park not to celebrate free speech, but to repress people that he does not agree with. Our host has come to this park from the last 20 years to repress free speech in this park, and he's done it in his far-right glee under the orders of Tommy Robinson. And pseudo-atheist Steve has moaned, oh, it's now just the religious groups here. When in actual fact, pseudo-atheist Steve has been singularly repressing people like now. In fact, here is an example of the far right repressing free speech. And we pseudo-atheist, with Bob the Destroyer, every time he says the word Muslim, will you put the word Jew on top of that and then listen to how Bob the Destroyer really speaks in this park?
Speaker's Corner should be about respect, right? It should be about listening to other people's views, even if you don't like them. My friend who just got up here disagree with a lot of what you said, but I don't disagree with you as a person. I agree with you about the police. I like the police. Thank you. I like the police, and I think they don't get paid enough for their job of risking their lives. But listen, we all need and desire respect in our lives. That's the bottom line, and that's what Speaker's Corner existed for from the beginning, when the government was not only persecuting but hanging people on that tree over there by the thousands for treason, for speaking things that they didn't like. What matters for me is what God thinks of me, and I know He loves me, and I know He wants us to love one another. But how do you get that to happen, right? How do you make someone love you? Impossible. If you made someone to love you, it'd be fake love. And that's what we fight against, all this artificial. Religion, a lot of times, is fake love because it's made up. It's on the outside, it's not on the inside. So we can respect one another and agree to disagree, can't we? Isn't that what Speaker's Corner should be about? When we try to shout someone down for speaking, when we want it to go back to a respect to say, Mr. Speaker, I was here 29 years ago. First started preaching here 29 years ago, and it was, Mr. Speaker, I have something to say. With respect, right? But you want that to go back to that today? I don't think so. It's not in people to have that kind of respect. So how do you expect people to treat you at a certain way which you feel is right? You know why you can't? Because everybody thinks they have a right today. Everybody's got their own right. Right. No, I'm right. So nobody's wrong. Instead of respect. And the greatest respect is that God sent His Son to die for our sins, to show us, to demonstrate His love for us. That if we accept Him as our Savior, it will become something within, not something without. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say. But I do love Speaker's Corner. I love the opportunity. Listen, when I get shouted down, probably more than most of you, because of what I'm saying, when I get shouted down, listen, I got to go with the flow. Doesn't bother me, because I know what I'm saying is above and beyond that, and I respect even my persecutors. So it's going to get worse. We have to adapt. Not let's get certain speakers in here so that everything will be better. It's respect from within. If you respect people, guess what's going to happen? They're going to respect you. And if not right away, eventually. So God's grace to you. Thank you.
And one of the things I want to focus on is the people of Speaker's Corner, and then I want to talk about the campaign over the last 2 years to defend Speaker's Corner against state aggression and violence, which was used systematically against us over the last 2 years. I was in court even last Friday, or just Friday past, accused of coming to Hyde Park, trying to speak on the 27th of December 2020. So these are two themes I'm going to cover. So the background, just a few anecdotal stories about people at Speaker's Corner. I was here still when Lord Soper used to speak, as a friend over here, he used to speak over here. And he had a tremendous oratorical style. He was almost like Shakespearean in his language. He had enormous vocabulary, an enormous ability to suddenly, it's almost like moments of epiphany. When someone's speaking, they say something and it suddenly holds the whole crowd. And there was a time here, I think it was his 90th birthday, where he came and spoke here. And there were literally 500 or 600 people gathered in this part of the park listening to him give his oration. And I just posted a few days ago, you can find it on YouTube, there's a video from the 1950s, I think it is, or late 40s, of Lord Soper standing here and speaking. And again, it was that atmosphere that he was able to hold a crowd. During the war, famously, there was a guy called Leslie Jones used to sell pamphlets here about Speaker's Corner in the underpass down there. And he wrote one about Lord Soper in Speaker's Corner. And in there he said, there was one moment in 1940, I think it was 40, during the Blitz, and Lord Soper was speaking over there. A bomb was heard. So he said, hold on a minute. And the crowd held. I shall carry on speaking. And these at Speaker's Corner are random crowds, passing people going through Hyde Park, who, if you can capture and hold the audience and bring the audience in, illustrate the way in which oratory works in real life. And that occasionally I've been able to do it, and you can, once you do it and you're motivated around the subject matter, you don't only have to do it at Speaker's Corner, you can do it in Leicester Square, on Trafalgar Square, anywhere where there's an open space. You can stand up, and if you appear to be moved in what you're saying, committed to what you're saying, and you're not purely mad, you will be able to gather a crowd. And don't forget, people talk about religious nutcases. Lord Soper was moved, as he believed, by the Spirit of God and the Spirit of Jesus. That's what motivated him. He was fanatical about this. That's what he spent his life promoting. And he believed that actually social justice and struggles to improve the rights of the people were an expression of the will of God. And he was an agent in that respect, temporarily on earth, fighting for those ideals. Preachers speak, and the people heckle the preachers, which is a tradition that, of course, exists, as you've seen at Speaker's Corner today. It still exists. I disagree with those who think that this is some threat. When I first came to Speaker's Corner, there were a group of people, a very vociferous group in the associated around the Monday Club, which was a Conservative Party sort of faction. And they trained themselves up at Speaker's Corner to heckle people. And initially I thought they're coming for me, attacking me. And after a few months I learned you just got to deal with it. And the way to deal with it is you take what they're giving, you know what they're coming with. You learn their lines and you repeat them back. And people started there. First of all, they used to say to me, are you a double act? Like me and Toad. There was a guy called Toad, you know. Oh, yes. Are you a double act, they said to me. Or Matthew Palmer, you know. And they say, you're a double act. And you had to, like, bite the bullet, tolerate these people being there. They hated you, you hated them, but somehow, as long as you held the thing together, you could still get your ideas across, still get your views across, still get your message across, and come back and feel confident the next week as well. Now, you don't have to like what someone says, but Speaker's Corner, as Leslie Jones used to say, is the university of the people. Yes. And it allowed people to come to Speaker's Corner who have no knowledge, people who we used to call them tramps, now they call them homeless. Tramps used to come up here and they would stand next to multi-millionaires and argue about communism or Christianity or Islam. And so that was the tradition which I've experienced over the decades at Speaker's Corner. Unfortunately for me, I was involved in a couple of Marxist groups. They all seemed to kick me out. And now they condemn me as a right-winger. So I'm a little bit weary about the labels people have used. Because over the last couple of years, people have accused me, I'm in association with Wilsey. I'm in association with the right wing. And so on. Why? Because we were opposing the single greatest act of international tyranny in history. The imposition of lockdowns and coronavirus dictatorships across the entire world on a lockstep basis, which appeared to us here in Hyde Park as the attempts by police and the de facto reality of the police closing down Hyde Park on and off for 2 years and arresting those of us. There were times when we just walked into the park and people were arrested just for walking into the park. And it wasn't anybody walking to the park, it was anybody entering the park who was a known face at Speaker's Corner. And the reason we were able to defeat them was because at the end of 3 anti-lockdown protests, we gathered here at Hyde Park. We agitated for people to defend Hyde Park. One occasion, the police were forced out in this direction. Another occasion, the police in open fields, just like in the 1850s. They had lined up about 150 police, making charges at us with their batons flying, grabbing small women
in particular small women, forcing them to the floor, handcuffing them, dragging them away, and we pushed them back out of the park on that occasion. The final occasion was last year on, I think it was the 24th of April. We came to Hyde Park and we drove them out, and there was a band playing here, Jab for Freedom. The police decided to close down the event here, and we drove them out of Hyde Park. First they came storming in. I remember Laura here, seeing the picture of her, turn around, push the bum against them, force them back like that. And everyone was going, get out of the park, get out of the park. And there were surreal scenes, the most fantastic imagery by Wilsey, by Sam, by Jim and others, of these smoke bombs going off and in and out of and the sound of the music still not playing, but the instruments have been turned into this weird surreal sound, and it was like something out of a film, except better, because it wasn't a film. It was us maintaining and defending our basic rights at Speaker's Corner, and the right to speak, the right to discuss, the right to organise, the right to protest. Those moments last year were seminal moments in the fate of freedom of speech and the right to demonstrate in Britain. And unfortunately, those on the left who refuse to attend will forever be condemned for their lack of willingness to stand up for the rights of the people. These are the ways we achieved our rights here. They will be in future the ways we maintain our rights. And there are many new conflicts coming. Long live Speaker's Corner, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Speaker's Corner is going downhill. If we cherish free speech in this country, one place that should be allowed to kind of like retain it is gonna be here. This is like a barometer of how strong free speech is. Now you saw earlier with Dust. I don't like Dust. Dust, you're an annoying little prick here. No offense to you, but he has a right to talk. And also, what was shown today is people have a right to walk off, right? So you're walking into a place that you know that's going to offend you, and you stand there being offended and then cry like a little bitch, and then you run around crying. You saw what Steve did. He didn't like what Dust was saying. He didn't attack him, he walked off. Yeah, that is one way to deal with it. You going into this place and getting upset, yeah, is absolutely insane. You know what's in there, you're not on the road. So a couple of weeks ago, I haven't been here for like a year. I came back 2 or 3 weeks ago, and an elderly gentleman called Uncle Asif. I don't agree with Uncle Asif, but he's a 65-year-old man. And there's a lot of feral young thugs around him, pushing him, grabbing his hair, and because they don't know what he's saying. So I've jumped in the middle, and they pushed me about like a freaking rag doll. Now, I can take it, yeah? I'm obviously the Rajanator, whatever you want to call me. I can take it. But this old man could have been pushed to the floor. And the thing is, the police, you are disgraceful. Let me say to you, you're disgraceful. Because when I watched that video back, I didn't realise the police were a couple of meters behind us, watching us being pushed about, and just standing in like freaking what? Like gnomes. I don't know what's the point of you being there if you don't do nothing, yeah? And you're watching for 10 minutes as an elderly gentleman is being pushed about. Now, for me personally, yeah, that situation for me was kind of minor. I've been in much worse, and I will be in much worse in the future at some point. But for an elderly gentleman to be pushed about and the police do nothing is disgraceful. We also know about the situation yesterday with Hatun. I disagree with Hatun wholeheartedly with what she's doing. I think it's counterproductive in some ways. Yeah. But the police to arrest her when somebody else had stolen their property shows you how incompetent the police is. Now, we're under the time when I used to come here, people are going to say, oh, there's fights, I got escorted out by, I can't remember how many policemen, and I had like 100 people kind of shouting, get me out, get me out. And I remember that day. It was the greatest day of my life. Yeah? I loved it. Yeah, the more you say you hate me, the more I love it. When someone says we hate Raj, you're giving me energy. I kind of got boosted up with that for years after that. I got that energy. But the point is this, even though things used to happen before, Steve Barnes, as much as you annoyed me during that time, a lot of times I used to curse you behind your back, sometimes in front of your face. But one thing I always knew about Steve Barnes, he loved Speaker's Corner. He loved the place, and he actually wanted the place to be what it is, which is a productive place where we can have conversations without it turning into kind of like a silly kind of school playground. The police, as of today, don't care about Speaker's Corner. They do not care. In fact, I believe, and I'm going to say it straight here, they want the park to close. They want the park to go into such a disarray that somebody is going to get hurt or killed, and then they're going to have to close the park down. Because I saw it in my own eyes, 2 weeks ago, an old man was being pushed about and I had to be the policeman. Me. Now if I got hurt, yeah, then what? The point is this, I should not be the policeman in the park, even though I can be. I could be judge, jury, and execution if you want me to be, yeah? Metaphorically, let's just say that, it's not in really, but in reality, I could be.
I mean, there is some self-policing that's necessary.
You have to, but what I realised, when I then looked back at the camera, I realised that, I'll take questions in a minute, I realised at the back, a couple of metres away, the police were there, just standing there like this.
Yeah.
And they can see a whole crowd moving with two people in the middle, being pushed for 10 minutes. And they did nothing. Now, this isn't the first time that I've seen the police be incompetent, but for me personally, the police are the problem. You're gonna have thugs and idiots walking in who don't understand. You're walking into there, you can walk out if you get upset.
So I've taken off my journalist hat. 150 years ago marks a great time in British history. When the government of Queen Victoria decided that it wanted to infringe upon the right of free speech of the English people fought back. As we've heard from speakers here, they tore up the railings of this park. They fought pitched battles with police, and they fought for their right to free speech, their blood right, their birthright. They did not simply wait to put a mark on a piece of paper. They took what was theirs by right. They had the courage to claim what they were owed. Freedom of speech is not just some nicety of a civilized society, it is the basis of it. For our society to flourish, and for any people, anywhere to prosper, for civilization and normality itself to exist, there are universal laws of nature which each of us must shelter under. It's no coincidence that natural law grants natural rights, for it's entirely a matter of right and wrong. Whether to respect your fellow man and to withhold from using violence against him, or whether to treat him as prey. Such rights include the right to speak freely, the right to associate freely or disassociate, to have your privacy, the right to trade and do enterprise, to make something and sell it freely without imposition, to defend yourself and those you care about, and from that our right to bear arms by which to defend ourselves, to put us on a level playing field against any aggressors. Such rights to life, to liberty and property are no great ask. To simply be left alone, for those around you simply not to attack you, and to forsake any unprovoked violence. Yet, where do we stand now in relation to those rights? We now live in a country where people are being locked up in a cell, where people are being taken away from their friends, from their family, from their employment, for speaking. We now live in a country which systematically robs people of their bodily integrity, which coerces them into medical treatments. Or let's talk about the widespread genital mutilation of young boys, which I've got to admire some of the activists here for speaking about. This is the only place in the country you'll hear about it. It's widespread. Tens of thousands a year. We now live in a country where peaceful protest is violently crushed, as Dr. Koo has talked about, and the pitched battles fought over there, just to go outside your house. We now live in a country where people are locked up for owning herbs, for deciding to take the drugs that they choose as adults of their own free volition to take. We are robbed of sovereignty over our own consciousness, that we cannot take what drugs we choose to amend our own experience, where despite there being no victim and therefore no crime, these people are treated as criminals. And yet how many millions of people in this country smoke weed or pop a pill or snort a line of coke? Well, we know all of those lot in Parliament are doing it, don't we? But I guess it's one rule for them and another rule for us. We now live in a country where the state covers up the systematic rape of children when they publish their report into the rape gangs in Telford and Rotherham, which, by the way, the police were complicit in, the local council were complicit in, the social workers were complicit in. The government decided that the British public shouldn't know all of the information. They shouldn't know the background of the perpetrators. Well, why not? This is a report paid for with our money, yet the government's telling us that we can't see it. We now live in a country where the government either invites or smuggles in hundreds of thousands of people each year. The people being smuggled, and this is state people smuggling, across Dover are just the minority. And the government is systematically trying to replace the native population of this country. And even worse, and this is the kicker, we now live in a society where the government systematically indoctrinates children to extinguish the values of our society, to extinguish the values of free speech, of self-defence, of free trade, of free association. And it now seems that they have almost completely, in the youth, eradicated the very basis of this country, let alone this small corner of it. And I can talk because I have experience of this. When I was a teaching assistant, when I worked in the state system in education, do you know how few children could even tell you where Wales was, or whether it was part of the United Kingdom? I remember I once taught a year 5 class, these children 10 or 11, and half the kids couldn't spell England. Half the kids couldn't spell England. And you might say, oh, well maybe this is some sort of misguided attempt at, trying to do their jobs but failing. I can tell you they don't give a toss for any of these children. There was this one time I was working with a young lad, and he had some mental health conditions, some special educational needs, as we call them. And he was about 7 years old. And he used to run out the classroom, and he said, nope, you can't stop him from running out the classroom, just follow him round, just watch. I'm like, okay, and if he gets into trouble, I guess I'll step in. And they sort of go, A year 6 boy had climbed onto the roof of the bike sheds, and below it was paved concrete. They were happy for this year 6 boy, maybe he was, 12 years old or something like that, to be up this high. And bear in mind I'm on a step ladder, so it's that high. And then this 7-year-old decided he wanted to do the same thing. Now I'm not sure whether any of you have seen a 7-year-old, but they regularly run into things at different points, and they trip over and they fall over bumps and scrapes and whatnot. This 7-year-old started climbing up these bike sheds to be this high up, concrete slabs underneath. What do I do? I went, what? Nope. Picked him up and down. I then got called into the headmistress's office and told that the school had a no-touch policy. Well, I've simply responded that the school had a dead child policy. And then they sacked me. Well, this is the thing. The schools want to talk on and carp on about safeguarding. Safeguarding. We've got to safeguard the children. From what? falling down and smashing their skulls on a patch of concrete? Well, no, of course, that's not important. No, the thing we've got to safeguard the children from is their own history, their own culture, values that will teach them to respect others. That's what this mal-education system is about. It's not an education system.
They do it to people.
It's indoctrination.
They do it to people.
And what we've seen is we've seen a long march through the institutions. We've seen the complete takeover of all of the British institutions by a radical, zealous, neo-communist element. This is best put by Professor or Doctor, now I think it is, David Starkey, when he talked about his time on the teacher training board. It took him a very long time to get in, and when he got in he found that every single person on there was a communist. All of the people training the people who are meant to educate your children, your brothers, sisters, cousins, are communists. They are totalitarians. They want to wipe out, stomp out any form of dissent, to teach them to live in fear and hatred of themselves, and not to respect others, but to use violence against others. And I want to talk about Lord Hewitt, who's talked about the replacement of votes in Parliament with just diktats issued by secretaries of state, where putting a tick in a box doesn't really do anything. It no longer matters, does it? Let's be honest. The electoral system's bankrupt. Do we really change anything? And we've also been conned, I want to say, into this idea, and this is what's being taught to the kids, and maybe it was taught to many of you, that the only thing that matters is votes. Well, if I had the choice between having a vote and having my rights, I choose rights. I choose my right to speak. I choose my right to live my life. I choose my right to do what I wish with my money, to associate freely and be uninterrupted. What's the point in being given a piece of paper that I put a tick on and changes precisely nothing, and which somehow legitimises this corrupt government? There are limits within which government must abide. There are limits on this tyranny of the majority, and it must be stopped. I mean, really, what's the point in speaking here? When I've talked about all of this, when I've talked about the complete erosion of all of our culture, even Toby Young mentioned it.
I'm here.
What's the point? What's the point on holding a piece of ground that's going to be swept away by the incoming tide? As one of the prior speakers said, free speech is not just when it's comfortable, not just when it's easy, but it's at the margins. It's when you're being offensive. It's when you're saying something that needs saying, that needs to be said because no one else is saying it. So what do we have to do? We don't just need to defend Speaker's Corner. We need to defend every single inch of this country. We must defend every inch of Britain for free speech. Speaker's Corner should not simply be here, but it should be everywhere. And we can't rest on our laurels. We can't sit back on Twitter like, the Toby Youngs of this world. We can't have our free speech union, but then kick out journalists when they ask public interest questions to politicians. And we can't continue condemning people and failing to defend them just because we disagree with what they say. We must stand up and we must fight. And frankly, not enough people bear scars on their wrists. How many people got up here and spoke when the government said, don't do it? When Metropolitan Police and TSG thugs were beating the crap out of us, how many people got up here and said no? Because I can tell you, if enough people stand up and say no, if enough people do not merely wait to be given what is theirs by blood and birthright, but simply claim it, then there is nothing that this corrupt and criminal government can do. So we must fight, and we must also remember to return to our traditions. We must remember that there's no point in speaking into a vacuum whilst your children are being brainwashed. Stop giving your children to other people to raise. 150 years ago, if you were a carpenter, then your son would be trained as a carpenter. You would be his teacher. Or maybe your brother would be his teacher. Or maybe your best friend, the next door neighbour, would be his teacher. The idea that we should give our children to strangers we don't know to raise them. I mean, really, how long do you actually get with your children? How long?
Not enough.
Who's spending more time with your children?
The television.
You, Hollywood, or these indoctrinators in the government? Who's raising your children? You know, we can all stand here and pontificate as much as we like. We can stand here and talk, or we can actually choose to embody the change that we want. So it's important, yeah, we've got to defend Speaker's Corner, but we've got to defend the whole of England, and we've got to make sure there's a new generation to take up the cause. Because at some point, we're all going to be gone. Some of us sooner than others. And frankly, as one of the people with the fewest grey hairs around here, I don't want to be left as the last guy standing. I'm not having it. I'm not having it. You need to take up the cause, and you need to fight, and you need to pass on the cause. And you need to be willing to risk everything. Not just speak and say, oh, I care about free speech, oh, I'm going to put out a tweet when it's convenient. You either believe in free speech or you don't. And the reason I'm here is because my great-grandfather, this was his favourite place in the entire country. And he went through a world war so that I could have freedom. Ask yourselves, if millions of people went through a world war, if millions of people died so you could simply speak, what is not worth doing to defend that which has been passed on to you? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Any hecklers? No. Oh, come on. Come on. You've ruined all the fun.
Hiya, please like, share and subscribe and keep your eyes peeled for my upcoming channel of The Director's Gut. Lyme's disease and SIBO are threatening my speech, so I'm writing an evolving health guide and asking for donations in order to fund treatment. The links are below. Cheers!